Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Rules of Engagement. Your host for today, and in fact every day, is yours truly, Nick axslav Ranish. Rules of Engagement is a tactical Starcraft 2 analysis show brought to you by MLG. Starts every day, Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and each day of the week has a unique theme. Every Mondays, we have Talking Tactics. That's where we take a look at professional level games and look at the gameplay they use there. I take a look at the tactics they use, analyze why those tactics led them to win, and how you can use those tactics at home to improve your game. Every Tuesday, we have Developing Fundamentals. That's where we take a look at some of the very basic parts of the game and take a look at basically how to approach getting better at Starcraft 2 and how Starcraft 2, all the different little pieces that make Starcraft 2 such a competitive game, what separates the best players from the worst. Every Wednesday, we have Mechanics of the Bazaar. That's where, again, I take a look at professional level games, but this time when I do strategies that are a little bit offbeat, a little bit crazy, and why that strategy was chosen for that instance, why it worked there or why it didn't work there, and why maybe we don't see it being used all the time. Thursday is going to be the Community Critique. That's where you guys can send me your replays. Go to majorleaguegaming.com/replays. You're at home, you're playing the game, you're like, you know what? This is a cool game. I want to see what axslav thinks about it. Or you know what? I don't know what went wrong this game. Why don't I ask axslav? You can send me that replay on the forum at majorleaguegaming.com/replays, and I'll check it out on Thursday. Of course, also, if you have a simple question you can put into words, send it to me on Twitter. Question about Starcraft life, tactics, strategy, whatever you want. Tweet at me at isaxslav. At the end of every show, I answer questions. Fridays, day of self-reflection. That's where I take a look at my own replays, kind of say what I did well, what I did poorly, and a couple tricks I personally use to basically beat people who are much faster or better hand-eye coordination than myself. And those are tricks you guys can take back at home to help yourself out when you're climbing the ladder. All these shows at 7 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Let's talk about what we have up on today. Today's going to be Developing Fundamentals. We've got a couple things to talk about. First, the home economics of the game, how you can basically build up your base and how you can choose where to allocate your resources. Talk a little bit about the foreign policy, how to decide what to do with your units, whether to defend, whether to attack, basically how they could be used to optimize both your offense and defense. And then we're going to end up with some tips and tricks. There's a couple little tips to make things more efficient, easier as you progress through the game. And of course, rounding out at the end with a question and answer period. So let's talk about what I have in store for you guys today in the home economics portion of the game. We got a couple things there. First, I'm going to talk about how fast do investments in economy pay off. Talking about expansions in SCVs or probes or drones, what have you. Then we're going to talk about how long does it take for the extra money that you made from this investment to be converted into units, basically made useful. And then we're going to talk about what situations should you stop making workers or should you not stop making workers. So let's jump right into the first section, which is going to be how fast do investments in economy pay off. I've got a little bit of a graph here for you guys. So if you take a look at the graph, this is 3 different situations. All these games are across a 10-minute time period. So game starts over here. No matter what, you have the same economy, right? It's always going to be low. But as the game progresses, you build more workers, you get more economy. The bottom graph is going to be if you stay on one base and keep building SCVs until you hit 24, which is like the perfect one base saturation point. The next one is going to be on 2 bases, but stopping at 32 SCVs, so 16 on each mineral patch. There's no gas mining. We're just going to simplify it all, talk about just purely minerals. So this line is going to be, if you have 16 workers on each base. And then the last line, the red one, is going to be, you go at 2 bases, you go all the way up to the full saturation, 48 SCVs total, 24 in each base. As you notice, these 2 lines that are crossing over a bit, that's because the mule drops are a little bit not on key in some of these replays. So the overall, though, the red one on average should be a little bit higher than I guess you call it the sign one, but not by that much. The difference isn't that extreme. The biggest difference you can tell is 1 base versus 2. So if you want to figure out how much money you're actually losing by not making the investment, and how quickly it pays off, you can take a look at the difference between the 2 lines here, right? So if you add up this area, all this area here, this is going to be this entire area. You can, if you know calculus, you can actually figure out the exact number there of what that actually is. That is all money you're not making, right? And so that adds up to be a certain amount. And then you can take another look at, okay, versus stopping at 32 workers off one base or going up to 48, I'm going to be losing this much money, right? Just this little section right here. And this, on average, is going to continue something like this. It's going to be like a separation that's of a certain amount. A little bit of quasi fluctuations there due to mules, but you can tell the biggest jump is just getting that single expansion. And you can kind of rough eyeball just by looking at the bottom here. So you can say, okay, so let's say the difference averages out to be like this much. Well, that much is roughly going to be 600, so let's say 700 minerals a minute. Over the course of 5 minutes, I just lost myself, 3,500, maybe 4,000 minerals from not getting that expansion. And so if you think about that, when you spend 400 minerals on a command center, it's going to take 100 seconds for that command center to finish. So let's say that the command center finishes right when the economy starts to diverge, right around this point, right here. In fact, let me just circle it. Right here is when the command center is finishing roughly, right? Oops, change colors there. So right when that command center finishes at that kind of key point, that's going to be the important part where, let me refix this up a little bit. So right when that command center finishes, that's the point of the game when all of a sudden your economy starts diverging. So 100 seconds later, command center finishes, and then how long does it take to get 400 resources? Well, you can kind of eyeball, it's going to be roughly around about here. Right here, this area, I mean, if you do math, you can figure out exactly, that's about 400 resources. So you can tell it pays itself off extremely quickly. That's only about 20 in-game seconds after it gets up does it actually pay itself off. Maybe about 30 in-game seconds. So when you expand, it takes 100 seconds to build a thing, 20, 30 seconds to pay off, 2 minutes down the road, you're going to get your money back out of it. And now, why is this important, right? It's important because there's one common concept that people have. Let me erase some of this stuff. There's one common concept people have when they play StarCraft. The big concept that's a huge misunderstanding is their opponent rolls in, let's say the 8, 9, 10 minute mark with a 1-1-1, or with a blink stalker timing, or with a bunch of roaches, whatever it is. They roll in like the 8, 9, 10 minute mark, something like that with a bunch of units. And then the other player just dies. He has his 2 bases, but his defenses get overrun. He's like, well, gee, I shouldn't have expanded. That made me lose because then I had less money for units. But the key thing there is, you know what? The 8, 9 minute mark, you're talking about something that's over, this is 10, like right here, right? Maybe you're being attacked right here. That's when you're being attacked, right? But all this is all money that if you expanded even faster, that money could all be units. Well, I mean, some of it would be SCVs, so you want to continue making SCVs, but most of that would be units. And so you actually have, the faster you expand, the more units you have, except for a 2-minute window between when you start the command center or the nexus or the hatchery and when it finishes. Although with Zerg it's still different because the hatchery actually gives you production too. So Zerg always expand. Other races always expand unless, of course, you're worried about being attacked in 2 minutes. So let's talk about the next point, which is how long does it take to convert this economy into units. You can tell here there's a big difference in the amount of economy you have if you expand or not. You get way more money. But just having extra minerals doesn't necessarily mean you can convert it into units faster. In fact, if you look at these graphs, they're still the same colors. You can see the legend over on the right side. But the interesting thing to know here, if we're being attacked at the 10-minute mark, let's say you're being attacked at the 10-minute mark is over here, right? That's where you're being attacked, on the far side. If we're being attacked right there, you would actually have the most number of units if you're on a 32 SCV 2-base economy. And the reason there is if you cut SCVs, you can build your barracks faster, because to turn minerals into units, first you have to build an additional barracks, which costs 150 minerals. And it takes about 65 game seconds. And then you can start building units, but then units have to be finished, and then all of a sudden you can convert that money into extra units. So even though very early on, in fact, actually if we jump back to that income graph, right, we can see very early on, right about this point, the income started diverging. We're going to put a little line through here. This is where the income started diverging a lot from having 2 bases versus 1. But if we jump back to the army graph, look at that point, right? We're going to continue it down here. The armies don't diverge. In fact, this is the point where people haven't even built up armies yet, right? So the armies don't really diverge until just about, in fact, one thing to notice, this is the amount of time it takes your army to catch up. Right around here, this is the extra army. This is about maybe two extra Marines. You have 2 more Marines from having a single base economy and getting faster barracks this zone in here is all a zone where all of a sudden you actually have more units from expanding later. But as soon as you get to this point, they hit equality, and then as it goes on, you can tell the other graphs start basically at this point. All of a sudden you have way more units if you expanded earlier. So as long as you're being attacked after this point, which is that's roughly the 9-minute mark. If you're being attacked at actually that's early. It's about the 8:30 mark. If you're being attacked at the 8:30-minute mark or later, you're much better off taking a fast expansion. If you're being attacked a little bit earlier than that, like maybe let's say the 6 to 8-minute mark, it doesn't matter too much if you expand or not. If you're being attacked before the 6-minute mark, that's where all of a sudden it's much better to have that have the one base. So if you go back in your games and you look at them and you notice you lost or not, this is what you should be thinking. You should be thinking, when did he attack me? If he attacked you before 6 minutes, like a 6-pull 2-axe, you're right, you shouldn't have an expansion. That could be all unless you're Zerg. But if you're Protoss or Terran, you shouldn't have an expansion. It'll be harder to defend in that situation. If it's between a 6 or 8-minute mark, it's not really a big deal whether you had expansion or not. If it's after the 8-minute mark, which I guarantee you, most of the times you die to one base build, it's going to be in that 8 to 12-minute mark range. That's what we're talking about, like 1-on-1 builds, Blink Stalker all-ins, 2-base Roach timings. A lot of those are all in the 8 to 12-minute range, somewhere in that zone. In that zone, you have a much stronger army if you expand off the start. And the really important thing to notice is when they attack you, the battle doesn't happen instantly. The important thing to notice here is look at the rate of increase these graphs are taking near the end. The red one actually has slightly the fastest rate of increase, although the red and cyan are roughly equivalent. But you can tell here the pink graph is pretty much hit a dead even. You just are increasing at a pretty steady rate. But the red and cyan ones are increasing, and they're basically the derivative is increasing. They're getting stronger. They're accelerating the way in which you build your units. So because acceleration is increasing during the battle, if you have that expansion, you'll be able to reinforce at a much faster rate. In fact, when I was playing these games, I was just playing Terran, making nothing but Marines. I was off of 12 barracks when I was doing with the 2 base economies. Whereas the 1 base I was off of 6. So every 25 seconds, you're getting 12 Marines versus 6. You're growing your army twice as fast. And so every like half a minute that passes, the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you're ever dying to attack between the 8 and 12-minute mark, you should look at that replay and say, you know what? I didn't invest too much in economy. I invested too late into economy. I needed to make an investment much earlier in the game, a faster expansion. Non-stop workers for at least the first 6, 7, 8 minutes. You know, if you do that perfectly, then you can usually hold off those attacks with ease. In fact, one good exercise is take a look at professional level games. The obvious case is take a look at Protoss versus Terran 1-on-1 builds. One thing you'll notice is that if a Protoss does a 1-gate expansion or Nexus first, and takes no damage to harass, no cloak ban to your Hellion drop, does a massive amount of damage, the odds of Protoss losing to 1-on-1 are about 1 in 30. There has to be an immense micro difference. The Terran 1-on-1 works well if the Protoss expands late, because then the armies are equivalent, or if the Terran gets a lot of damage done with that Hellion drop, the cloak banshee, which of course, if they micro well, they can often do. But that's where the battle's decided, not when the actual engagement happens. So take a look at your games whenever you die at timings and say, you know what, maybe I should have expanded earlier and it would have paid off by the time that attack came into play. Unless there's about 2-minute window, like I said, about 2 minutes for the expansion to pay itself off, and then another, depending on your race, as we can see here, is about another 2 minutes for Terran. It's about 2 to 3 minutes on top of that for the expansion to turn into, for that money that paid off to turn into extra units. For Protoss, it's more about 1 minute to 1.5. And then for Zerg, of course, it's almost instantaneously because you get that extra larva production boost immediately. So for Zerg, 2 minutes to pay off. Protoss, 3.5 in units. And Terran, more like 4 or 4.5 minutes for you to get extra benefit out of the expansion in terms of military strength. Thank you guys for watching this section of Rules of Engagement. We'll take a quick break and be right back on with some tips on how to deal with your foreign policy in the game of StarCraft 2.